Are you Laura Palmer?
Hello, and welcome to The Lodgers. It's our inaugural edition. This is, of course, the Twin Peaks podcast hosted by myself. My name is Simon Howell, and every week I will be joined by my brilliant and talented co-host, Kate Rennebohm.
Hello, I am Kate.
Hooray! When was the first time you think we proposed doing this? Like 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago?
Oh God, I have no idea. Yeah, probably 6 months ago. Sounds about right.
It's been a long time in the offing. Way back in the day, you and I, along with Ricky D, did one of the most ridiculous recordings I've ever been a part of, which was what ended up as like a 3-hour podcast about David Lynch and Inland Empire and Mulholland Drive. And ever since then, you've always been my go-to for talking Lynch, and for lots of other things. But yeah, so very excited to be doing this. So here's how this is going to work. Essentially, we've timed it out. So we're going to be going through the entire original run of Twin Peaks, including Fire Walk with Me, at a clip of, on average, about 2 episodes a week, lining up, hopefully, with the premiere date of the new season. This week, we're only going to be talking about the double pilot. Later in the run, we may be talking about more than 2 episodes a week for reasons that should be obvious to everyone. But we're not there yet. In other weeks, we will have fabulous guests. This week, we're just going to stick to us. So I hope everyone's real excited to talk some Twin Peaks. For some of you, it's going to be your first time watching. You're getting prepared for the new season, and probably not necessary, but we will be avoiding major spoilers for future episodes. But I think you can agree, Kate, that this isn't, for the most part, not really a spoilable series.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who have no idea sort of even what the core mystery is, let alone who the kind of final reveal is. And so we'll definitely be trying to avoid that. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty saturated into the pop cultural consciousness. So we'll hopefully we won't be able to do anything too dramatic in terms of spoilers anyway. But I don't know. I mean, I do hope there are people who haven't seen the show before and are interested in trying to follow along on the podcast for the first time. I mean, I think part of what happened seeing it so many years later is that you don't have what happened originally when it was on television, which was this sort of mass response to it. And so it might be nice to have a kind of like critical accompaniment, like following you through the first time you're watching it. I've had recent friends that we turned on to watching it who watched it for the first time and, fell in love with it. And I think something like this would have been very nice for them to have while they were watching it. So
yeah. Before we even get to talk about the pilot, you sort of hinted at this already, but I would love to just take a minute and really set the scene for Twin Peaks and just talk about the phenomenon a little bit. Because watching television and producing television, for that matter, writing criticism about television, all this stuff, the television culture was so different in 1990 on every possible level. And like the level of popular engagement with a single series could be so much higher. And that was certainly the case for Twin Peaks. For just like a really like rough and tumble comparison, like probably the most popular scripted series right now, or at least it was recently, was The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead at its peak, I believe the most recent season premiere, got 17 million viewers. That's a lot of viewers, but Twin Peaks, I mean, I don't know what was the most it ever got. I know that for particular episodes, like it was up to like 30 million.
The pilot was 34.6 million.
Jesus.
Yeah, when it played on the Sunday. And that is the highest they ever had. It was downhill after that. They held strong for the following weeks, and I think like I'll try to sort of check in and we can at least try to keep track of what the ratings were for these early episodes. But they started off really strong. That's always been sort of part of the myth of Twin Peaks, is that its pilot hit network television like, I don't know, a bomb or something. Like it was crazy. Like there was a lot of writing about how people were not really prepared for what it did. I think you wanted to sort of mention this. The quality of network television was not so great in 1990.
Yeah. I'd like to talk briefly about some of the other shows that premiered in 1990, most of which is just totally forgotten now. Like there was a network adaptation of Ferris Bueller. The concept was that it was like the real life stories that inspired Ferris Bueller, and like Jennifer Aniston in the Jennifer Grey role, like totally like who remembers this? No one. I had no idea. But yeah, so there's just all this like cultural detritus garbage floating around.
Well, and also, I mean, for people who are like aren't sort of television or media studies nerds like us, it is worth pointing out that at that time in 1990, there still were only three major networks, which were ABC, NBC, and CBS. There was a kind of burgeoning cable scene, so things like HBO and stuff were starting to take more hold of what was available and create content for themselves on television, but they were still the kind of small challenger to something like the three networks. So basically, everybody just watched what was on the three networks, and so they really were setting the tone for what was being made, and it was generally kind of procedural television shows like cop shows, soap operas during the day, and comedies. I mean, that was what the majority of it was. When Twin Peaks moved to its regular slot on Thursday night the following week, it was going up against Cheers, was its main competitor. That's sort of the landscape, the Twin Peaks, which really was conceived and shot as like a feature-length film, went up against when it arrived on television on Sunday, April 8th, 1990.
Well, here they are. That is the most talked about, most written about, most controversial show on television this season of What Do I Speak? And Who Killed Laura Palmer? Do you know?
I think we should also mention maybe the popular perception of Lynch, and something that I find fascinating in going back into the archives from this period is seeing all these late night appearances from like Kyle MacLachlan and David Lynch, and I always have thought of him as like an art filmmaker first and foremost, but there was really this period where he was really part of the pop culture consciousness in like a Joe Schmo kind of level, which like I guess that's still kind of true in the sense that we all know sort of what Lynchian means. Which is something that we will definitely have cause to talk about later, but like it really is incredible the degree to which a guy as strange as Lynch was able to create this pop culture artifact.
I mean, I think it was very much a calculated move on ABC's part in terms of attracting David Lynch to work with the network, because the other part of the sort of myth here is that when Twin Peaks arrived on ABC was in the bottom for the ratings. They were trying to compete with NBC and CBS, which is part of why they were sort of willing to take a gamble on Twin Peaks. I mean, when they sort of hooked Lynch and Mark Frost, I think sometimes gets left behind in these discussions, but Mark Frost was also a really big deal at that point. Like, he'd worked on Hill Street Blues, which was, I think, alongside Twin Peaks, considered one of these early indicators of there being a first wave of quality television where writing was sort of as important as anything else, et cetera, et cetera. But when they attracted David Lynch, part of the promise was that they were giving them money to make, eight episodes total for the first season, 9 hours of television, basically without supervision. Like, they were given the money and the budget and allowed to just shoot all of it without network notes, without overseeing. And so I think that was part of what attracted Lynch, but equally the network was willing to spend that money because they knew that having Lynch attached to a television show would be a big coup. I mean, a lot of the kind of press around it talks about this idea of like a major Hollywood sort of auteur working in television and that being such a big deal, because I think you're right, Simon, like he was even, if not a name where everybody actually knew what he was doing or really understood it, his name at least already stood in for a kind of like crazy cachet of sort of like coolness, which is largely related to Blue Velvet, right? Like a kind of controversy. Like Blue Velvet came out in '86, right? So it was 4 years prior, and it had been a huge deal, I think, in the American consciousness. So
yeah, and I think not only was it this was back in the days when people really got scandalized by movies, which doesn't really happen anymore. Yeah. Like, we're all just so jaded that, nothing's really got us shook. But like Blue Velvet, I recall reading, like Roger Ebert's original review where he just certain aspects of it he was just shocked by. And, it was very much a different time for like media consumption in that way.
Yeah.
I think having Lynch come into this like, former safe space of network television. Definitely a calculated move. I guess this is as good a place as any to actually segue into talking about the double pilot, us and the 34 million who originally watched it, and everyone else who's watching now. So I guess let's just get into it. It was written by Lynch and Frost and directed by Lynch. And I have to say, my first thought on rewatching this pilot, just as it was starting, was, oh my God, there are so many people in the credits. that was my first thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty common thing that people talk about with this episode is people have some vague memory of it sort of being about Laura Palmer, and then they actually go back and rewatch it, and they're like, holy crap, there's 400 characters in this show.
Which, like, I've mentioned this to other people, and there's this perception that, yeah, they needed to have all these characters because they were planning to draw out this mystery forever, and they needed to have like an infinite number of suspects, which I guess is logical. But I think one of the things that people don't talk about a lot with Twin Peaks is the fact that there are so many characters is like kind of a world building coup, because way more than like, because there have been so many shows since Twin Peaks about like small towns with secrets, and like, you know, it's just so like I've seen hundreds of them, and I'm just sick to death of them. But then they've usually got like, you know, they have like a rich ensemble of usually like 12 characters, and it's so quaint when you watch Twin Peaks, which has like even just in the pilot alone like 40 characters or something.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, yeah, I think like the numbers of characters is interesting because it's, I think, not only in terms of there being probably like practical realities of why Lynch and Frost were building in so many characters, because again, like this is also part of the lore of the show, is that Lynch, I guess from the get-go, really didn't want to have to reveal anything in relation to the secrets of the show. They didn't want to have to reveal who the quote killer was until the absolute end of the show. That had always been the plan, was to sort of not really deal with that and have it be much more about simply the kind of like world experience of the show and all the characters and the narratives and everything. And so they were clearly thinking about that with the numbers of people. But there's also the fact that it really is just sort of like a standard of the genre, of the like mystery genre, right? Is that you have such a huge number of people so that the viewer has to sort of play detective and be like, well, it could be this person, it could be that person. And I think like one of the things that again, I'm sure we will talk about at length, is that I think Twin Peaks is often talked about in relation to the soap opera as like the genre that it's most obviously playing with and like kind of using as sort of its own reference for what it's doing. And the soap opera is definitely there, but I think people forget to think about like the mystery genre as an equal one. There's a really great recent book on Lynch by Dennis Lim, and Dennis at one point in the book talks about the kind of idea of the genre of the fish out of water detective, like the detective who comes in to solve something from another city. And I mean, and Twin Peaks is so clearly sort of working in that vein and doing it so beautifully.
The other thing, I mean, my overall impression of rewatching the pilot, I first saw the pilot maybe, I want to say only 3 or 4 years ago. When
really?
Because I'd never seen Twin Peaks at all, and I watched the entirety of it for the Televerse podcast, for just like a segment, and I saw the pilot for the first time then. Rewatching it now, as much as I do think it's a great pilot, I think it does. You know, there's so much writing on what TV pilots have to do, and I think in terms of doing all the things that pilots have to do, I think this does it in a really superlative way. I don't think that the pilot showcases the best of Twin Peaks. In the way that I remembered it doing. It's got a lot of good stuff, and it's a very good pilot, but like to me, it skims the surface of that iceberg.
Yeah, I agree. When we just rewatched it for this, a couple of things occurred to me, which was that I usually don't just watch the pilot. I usually watch the pilot plus sort of 2 or 3 episodes of it. And really, I think particularly for people who are new to the series and are maybe trying to get a sense of what the show is doing, I would say watch right up to episode 3. I mean, that really gives you a much better sense, I think, of what the show really is. Lynch only directed the first 2. Lynch directed the pilot and the next episode. And then they start bringing in the more standard model other television directors. But Lynch and Mark Frost were responsible for kind of writing and envisioning the whole first season and then parts of the second season. And anyway, so the pilot, when you watch it just alone and really cut it off at the end the way that that an actual regular television viewer would have had to in 1990, I think the thing that struck out for me this time was how the pilot is less unusual than I've built it up to be in my brain, which is a funny thing to say because in the universe of television in 1990, it would have been quite radical. Like, it really was really unusual, but it also doesn't go quite as extreme as maybe the adjective Lynchian stands in for us now, Yeah,
there are a few moments that I would isolate as being like harbingers of what's to come, and they're mostly like very subtle. Like the shots, I want to say around the 3/4 mark of the episode where it just cuts to a red streetlight. And you're like, why? And you're like, why am I seeing a red streetlight? Like, it's in the middle of some dialogue, and then it just like cuts back to the town hall or whatever, and it's like, why? And then eventually you figure out why you're seeing the streetlight. But it's like that's like one of the few moments of like, this is not normal.
Yeah. Well, I should be careful not to go too far either in saying that it's not an unusual pilot, because it really is, and definitely the kind of odd insert shots are certainly the first hint that there are things happening here that are not interested in sort of following the rules of efficient television, right? Where, for people who are maybe not, again, media nerd types, there's generally a kind of rule in both Hollywood filmmaking and television, which is that there's a real economy of images and words, so that every image is there really purposefully to kind of like deliver words to you that relate to plot, so that you're getting as much sort of plot and attention-grabbing stuff into every sequence that you can get. And Lynch is really not interested in doing that at all.
Yeah.
And some of that, again, I think they're able to play with some of that because of the generic frameworks of mystery shows. Like, one of the articles about Twin Peaks from 1990, I think in Variety or something, talks about the funereal pace of mystery shows where you're sort of dragging out the mystery. But more than that, Lynch is doing things like we start to get repeated shots of still to this day, what I find to be one of the most unsettling shots of the show, the sort of up-angled shot of the ceiling fan in the Palmer's house that is perpetually running. And you get that even twice, maybe 3 times in the pilot. Yeah. And at that point, it serves no purpose, but except for the sort of atmospheric purpose. But over the course of the show, that becomes an incredibly important shot. But anyway, so definitely there are odd things that are happening already there.
Yeah. I think the main aspect that I found to be unusual in rewatching the pilot, and I'd forgotten about how off kilter it really is the tonal mishmash of like the scenes of funereal is a great word, of these like of funereal mourning and dread, like mashed up with these scenes of like teens being wacky. Of course, teens played by like 22-year-olds, as is the case always on television. It's reflected not only in how the characters behave, but especially in the scoring, which of course we have to mention Lynch and Angelo Badalamenti working together on the music. And these cues, like if you ever get a chance to hear the entire Twin Peaks archive of like 9 hours of music cues, I highly recommend it. It's a day well spent. And it's watching the pilot is a lot like listening to that archive on shuffle. These cues just mash up against each other in really, really in ways that must have. It still seems strange to me now.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine how it scanned at the time.
Yeah, I think this is, again, one of these things that we'll probably keep returning to and pulling apart because it's so much a part of the show. But I think this is a real marker of the pilot, and people do refer to it in the press about it as well, which is, this idea of there being a real... almost like schizophrenic is too strong because it doesn't feel schizophrenic, but there is very rapid shifts between really kind of dark, brutal, weighty moments in the show immediately right into like a funny sort of bit, and then right back into a kind of horrible thing. It's there's like, for example, I kind of tracked through the episode again right before we talked to keep track of some of these, and you have cuts like you have scenes like Coop, and I guess maybe we should do a bit of a breakdown of what actually happens in the pilot at some point, but you have scenes like Coop talking to the sheriff, and they're going through things that they've discovered from Laura's possessions, and you have a cut of Coop saying things like, Diane, I'm holding in my hand a small box of chocolate bunnies, and it's like a funny joke. And then you cut right to the train car where Laura and Ronette were like brutally tortured, and like Andy weeping. And it's like, what? Oh my God. So it definitely, in that sense, I think, is both really unusual but also masterful in the way that it continually throws you off like track. You have a really hard time sort of pinning what to expect tonally from scene to scene, and it continually kind of draws you back in.
Right. I mean, even like Andy weeping is a perfect example, because even that is like both sad and hilarious.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of like tonal mishmash, like I think another good example would be that bizarre sequence of Audrey and the Swedes.
Yeah, of course.
Which, like, you know, that happens in like the same space where, you know, previously we just had like some of the most crushingly sad moments of the episode, and like, why is it there? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you get this sequence. It's very similar to the one I just mentioned, which is that it builds up. You know, Audrey sort of uses Laura's death as a way to mess with her father by sending these Norwegian businessmen away, and the sequence ends with all of them marching out of the Great Northern Hotel with all of their bags, and there's like crazy stuff happening in the hotel lobby and music and noise, and Ben Horne is chasing them, and the woman at the desk is ringing a bell repeatedly saying, "The Norwegians are leaving, the Norwegians are leaving," over and over and over again. And again, from that, it cuts back to Coop and the sheriff in the train car where Laura was brutally murdered. And it's like horrible, horrible stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, that sequence is amazing. Like, it also is one of the first times I think that you get, with the Norwegians are leaving, it's one of the first times you get a really common element of both Twin Peaks but Lynch's work in general, which is a kind of really unusual use of repeated words and phrases. Like, the Norwegians are leaving, the Norwegians are leaving. Like, Lynch has a kind of way of turning dialogue into just sort of sound and noise, which comes back to the music thing again, right? It creates this almost like talismanic quality of what gets said in the show, which is why there are so many like super recognizable phrases from the show, right? Because they get said over and over and over again, and they're really great, and they like really kind of capture your imagination. But anyway,
this sort of gets us away from the episode a little bit, but something that I also want to sort of keep track of and mention as we discuss the show is like the influence of Twin Peaks, and like how other series, other films, other like pop culture in general has like tried to produce Lynchian art. Especially Twin Peaksian art, and like two wildly divergent levels of success. When you were talking about the talismanic quality of repeated phrases, I remember I see, you know, this is how bad they did it. I can't even remember the phrase, but there was this horrible CW show a few years ago called Cult, and like every single episode, they had characters like repeat this phrase, and it was supposed to be like weird and mysterious and like really get you into the like meta world of the show, and it totally failed because I can't even remember what the phrase was, and I watched like 5 episodes.
These things just snap right off.
Yeah, that does not surprise me. I mean, I think we'll probably end up talking about this a lot and we've personally just had a lot of conversations about this, like shows that are very much trying to work in the vein of Twin Peaks and of Lynch, and like whether or not they get it right. I mean, I think maybe we'll end up talking about it later, but for me, one of the only shows that I've ever seen manage to pull off anything like what Twin Peaks is doing is a French miniseries called Petit Quinquin, or Little Quin in English. I actually can't remember. Did you see that show, Simon?
I watched the first episode. I'm not a Bruno Dumont fan, and I found it very irritating, but I can definitely see how it would have some of that appeal.
I'm not really a Bruno Dumont fan either, but once you get into the middle of it, there are a couple of sequences in it that are so perfectly in the spirit of something like Twin Peaks that it's kind of amazing. But anyway, it's a bit off track. But yeah, for the pilot, I mean, I suppose just so for anybody who hasn't seen it in a long time and is interested in listening to the podcast, but maybe not going back and rewatching everything, I suppose we should just do like a very brief recap of what actually happens in the episode. I mean, I don't know. Does that seem useful to you, Simon?
Sure. Very briefly, I mean, obviously it opens, you know, I always forget that the first face we see after like this long montage of the opening and like the factories and whatnot is actually Josie.
Josie, yeah.
Which is a very interesting choice. But anyway, so, obviously it more or less opens with the discovery of Laura's body on the beach. She's dead, wrapped in plastic. Brings Coop into town. Everyone finds out.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing there, too, is, and this is another thing that people don't remember, is that you don't actually get Coop, which is who played by Kyle MacLachlan, at that point had already collaborated with Lynch twice in 2 other films. Kyle MacLachlan doesn't show up in the show until 36 minutes into the pilot.
That's true.
Which is kind of amazing. I mean, the opening sequences go through, again, a very choreographed set of moves that follow the genre standards of this type of show, which is that you see the body, cops arrive, deal with the body, cops go to tell the father, mother hears about it, friends hear about it, right? It moves through all of these things in a very clear kind of way.
Right.
And as my husband pointed out watching it, it's you think, oh, I've got a beat on this show. I understand what's happening. Then they're going to start the investigation. And then at 36 minutes, this character, from another planet, arrives in the show and, again, completely sort of blows open what you think is happening. It's a very different kind of tonal quality to him.
There's that procedural vibe at first of okay, yes, everyone gets informed, and we sort of start to find out what the seedy underbelly of the town is in terms of these these almost incestuous relationships just sort of sprouting around everywhere. I mean, that's really all the episode is. Just sort of establishing the relationships, getting to know sort of the tenor of the town, and finding out what the stakes are for everyone. There's not a ton of plot, really.
I mean, well, it's weird. There isn't, because there's a lot of character introduction. I mean, as you say, with this many characters, you get a lot of this person is sleeping with this person, and this person is married to this other person. And I mean, again, one of the articles, I think, in the New York Times early on talked about how, as Twin Peaks was sort of hitting its stride at the beginning and this big phenomenon, people were not only having viewing parties where they were sort of eating cherry pie, and apparently this is one of the, again, who knows if this is actually true, but apparently in the first few weeks of Twin Peaks, there were massive runs on cherry pie, and bakeries could not stock it fast enough. But anyway, so alongside the kind of viewing party stuff, there was apparently also people having to make charts where they were keeping track of which character was connected to which, because they couldn't just remember. I mean, the thing, again, that we should also acknowledge at this point is that we have a very different viewing experience of this show now than would have been available in 1990, right?
Yeah.
In 1990, people wouldn't have been able to watch it again. They would have been watching it with commercials, which I do think is another very different thing than what we've seen. I mean, I think apparently at the time there were rumors leading up to the release of the pilot that Lynch had put his foot down and there wouldn't be any commercials on the one hand, and then on the other hand it was that ABC was sort of trying to do this to kind of spur chatter about the show, that it would be a show without ads, and then anyway, there was a lot of talk about whether there would be commercials or not, and then sure enough, there definitely was commercials in it. But anyway, so I think we have a very different experience of it now, and also, I mean, I've seen the pilot a million times. I mean, you'll probably hear more about what a Twin Peaks nerd I am over the show, but I've seen the pilot so many times. So for me, it's I have all the information in my head, but I think when you watch it the first time, there is a lot of characters being introduced, a lot of sort of information about who knows who and who's sleeping with who. But I think the 2 levels there that are maybe worth separating out is that there is, on the one hand, kind of background stories where you have Shelley sleeping with Bobby, Catherine Martell and Benjamin Horne and Josie and Packard, all of these people that are sort of on the fringes that are maybe less intimately connected to Laura Palmer and the family. There's all of that stuff, but then in the middle of it as well, there's this core of people that are very deeply affected by Laura's death, and that's, I think, where you get some of the really kind of important emotional shifts in the show are between the moves from those sort of fringe characters back continually to Laura's parents and to the Lara Flynn Boyle character, whose name is Donna, and Laura's 2 boyfriends, but really one boyfriend, James Hurley. But anyway, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Simon.
The thing that I'd forgotten about somehow and then found very haunting on rewatch is this notion of no one is surprised exactly by her death. She's been gone for 12 hours or something, but somehow everyone it's not Laura Palmer's dead. It's just she's dead. She's
Yeah.
like, she is the center of this town, and everyone knew she was going to die. And yet they're also like totally struck by the tragedy of it. That's like a totally bizarre balance that they went for, and that it's actually like really affecting for some reason.
Honestly, Simon, I think you probably just hit right there on like one of the key aspects of the show, and I obviously we'll keep talking about it, but I mean, I think. I just think this is the genius of this. I think again, it's probably a pretty standard idea that, and it is because there's a million other shows that you can name that do this, where there's a kind of girl at the center of it who's killed, and everybody thinks she's great, but then it turns out she has secrets. Like I'm thinking of The Killing was another show that did this recently. But I think what Lynch does over the course of Twin Peaks is, really take seriously this idea that a whole town knew that this girl was in trouble, and really just preferred believing the illusion that she was this perfect prom queen, and really just does not do anything about it. But as you say, is both shocked when the illusion is lifted and she's killed, and then also not surprised at all because they all already knew. And I think that tension is like so much at the heart of this show, and really it's at the heart of what Lynch is doing, I think, in his whole aesthetic project, which is this question of, again, I'm kind of cribbing from Dennis's book, but Dennis puts it so beautifully when he says that Lynch is really fascinated with this idea of both the pleasures and benefits of believing in an illusion, and the risk and like tragedy of believing in an illusion. And I think there, the illusion is as much about film and art and like the image of things as the reality. But I think that this is so genius at the heart of the show.
Yeah, and I think that duality lives not only in Laura and her life and death, but in so many of these supporting characters. And I think one thing that I really would love to feel or understand is if I had a time machine and got to go back and watch this with everyone else, I would love to know how the acting was perceived at the time. Because like this is like one of the aspects that is so alien to like current television, is like these, especially the supporting actors, they're pitched in a certain way, and they're like so up to 11. I'm thinking specifically mostly of the younger actors, like James Marshall, Dana Ashbrook, like these guys, like these are such campy performances.
Yeah.
And in parts of the episode, actually in most of the episode, it's kind of funny and in like an over the top kind of way. And I find it interesting that like the number one movie in the country at the time was like John Waters' Crybaby, because so many of these performances actually have that like that over the top retro, like, but not real retro quality of Crybaby. But then because it's Lynch and he knows how to do these things, like he can modulate the aesthetics just enough to make those same performances like really effective and creepy, like he does at the very end of the episode when we get the barking.
Yeah, with Bobby and Mike barking at James Hurley. Yeah, I know. I remember still that sequence from when I watched the show the first time, and I was like, what is happening? Like, I was like, I can't, this is insane. Because again, it's like it sort of makes sense. You're like, these two guys are trying to intimidate this other guy in this jail, but there is a level of like, of excess and inexplicability to it that just completely throws you. You're like, what? Ugh. But it's great. It's amazing. I think in terms of performances, like the one, because there actually is again a lot of sort of references to this in the press about the show, is the one performance that gets talked about pretty continuously is Grace Zabriskie, who plays Laura Palmer's mother, and and she's even sort of talked about it a lot, which is that people, like, of all of the kind of performances that maybe hold within them this challenge of being both very sincere but pushed to 11, like just a step too far, hers is the one that really holds that in check in both ways, right? Like because again, for people who haven't watched the episode recently, you get continuous sequences of Grace Zabriskie like really sort of crying, almost screaming, like being hysterical sort of uncontrollably. And yet, and it continually crosses into like almost makes you want to laugh. Like there are a couple of parts where she sort of yelps weirdly that you're like, this is just so strange. But then simultaneously in the same sequence, like there's one right in the middle of the episode where Doc Hayward sort of gives her an injection to calm her down so she can talk to the cop. And he's asking her questions, and Grace Zabriskie is sort of trying to get out like phrases that she said to Laura Palmer the night before. It's things like "good night, sweetheart," and her voice, like, she keeps sort of choking on the words and keeps sort of breaking down, and it is one of the most raw, kind of like brutal performances. And I think, again, Lynch is so good at walking that line of understanding that there's almost a similar move to be made there, like a move towards both the kind of hyper excessive comedic aspects of the performance is like the mirror image of the move towards just the unbelievable rawness and pain of the performance. And here they don't end up canceling each other out. They just make it stronger. Like, they make it harder even to kind of incorporate, which again I think speaks to a lot of what he's doing in the whole show. But it's very challenging to watch her in those sequences. And I think honestly people take the easy way out sometimes and simply laugh at all of it. And I don't think you're laughing because it's funny. You're laughing because it's very difficult to watch.
Yeah, you're laughing as a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Grace Zabriskie to me is like one of the like 5 like ultimate Lynchian actors, like almost up there with Kyle MacLachlan. Like, especially like we only get like a tip of it here, but like her work in Inland Empire is just amazing.
Yep.
Like, I think if he'd had the idea to shoot her in like hyper close up in digital in 1990, he would have done it. But
oh yeah,
but
totally.
We weren't there yet.
The other performance I wanted to mention though, because I think it's worth mentioning, is maybe a contrast to the sort of more hyper ones of the other people, is the one that actually still stands out for me over the years, going back to this episode, is Lara Flynn Boyle's performance as Donna. Mm-hmm. She has some of the most maybe more kind of straightforwardly like tragic scenes, like scenes where a character is because she's Laura's best friend, like hearing that her best friend has died, and just sort of weeping over it. And I still find them some of the most heartbreaking sequences in the show. And I think like we haven't talked about this so much, maybe just what Lynch is doing with the filmmaking, but I think the sequence in the middle of it's maybe like a third of the way into the episode where the parents have both heard, and you move to kind of a long sequence at the high school, which is sort of, again, one of the great parts of the pilot. And in fact, apparently Lynch has sort of talked about when they chose that high school to shoot at, the fact that the high school was still very much sort of like painted as if it was the 1950s, like the high school was built in the 50s, it looked like it was from the 50s, that ended up influencing very much the way that they sort of set design and costume everyone as if it's a sort of mix of the 50s and the 80s. And like, we'll keep talking about that, I suppose, the aesthetic quality of that. But anyway, when you get to the high school, one of my favorite sequences in the whole show is the sequence where you're in the classroom and you see kind of Audrey and James and Donna all in the classroom, and a cop comes in to talk to the teacher, and nobody says anything to anybody else. There's no dialogue that you hear that says Laura's passed away. All you actually hear is at one point Donna looks out the window and a girl runs through the yard crying, screaming, and it cuts back, and all it is a series of kind of choreographed looks moving between people, and the teacher looks at Laura's desk, and Donna starts crying, and James becomes upset. And I still think there's something that Lynch taps into there, which is, again, what you've already mentioned, which is that everybody already knew this was going to happen. Everybody was just waiting to find out when Laura had died. Like they didn't literally know, but they figuratively knew. And I don't know, I think it's a genius scene.
I want to take a moment. A while ago, like a few months ago, you discovered a set of IRC chats.
Oh, yeah.
So essentially, there was, for people who don't know, in the olden days of the interwebs, people would talk via IRC chats, and who found exactly?
Olivia found them? No, I think I was looking for them, and my husband helped dig these up, actually, okay. I think. And then there was a blog that had done the work for us, which was great.
So we found this set of IRC chats from when Twin Peaks was originally airing. And what's even luckier is we found these really spooky audio recordings of said IRC chats. I'd love to play one of them for you now because, people had all sorts of theories about who the killer was, and some of the theories are wild and hilarious and possibly even accurate. But of course, we couldn't possibly spoil that for you. I just wanted to quickly play you one of these spooky recordings I found.
April 17th, 1990. Nick. Here's my theory. The sheriff did it. Why? because no one would ever suspect him. And just think of how good he'll look when he catches the killer. He's going to frame someone. I don't know who. Remember how old the mayor is? That's right. He's going to retire. And guess who's going to run for mayor? That's right, the sheriff, who's a power-hungry sociopath. You want to know how he did it? He started a cult that the town is going to blame the murder on. Many people know about the cult and are in it, but it's very secret. The only evidence thus far is the scene where Bobby and his best friend are barking at Jay in the town prison. When Bobby started barking, his friend joined in immediately, indicating it's something they've done before. I maintain they do it at meetings of the cult. The evil sheriff theory also explains why he is seducing the richest woman in Twin Peaks. More developments on Friday, when I have a completely different set of theories.
And that leads me into the genius of the show, and like one of the most influential aspects is ABC having the presence of mind to like when they hooked in Lynch to connect it to popular imagination by like leaning into the mystery aspect and like activating people's most like paranoid fantasies and like their like detective lizard brains. to put it the only way I can think of, and like in a way that like no like so many that's like one of the most influential aspects. Like so many shows since then have really tried to like activate viewer imagination and get them involved in the process of investigation. And it was even like obviously it was referencing Who Shot JR, but like I always think of like the Simpsons 2-parter. Even I feel like there hasn't been like anything close in terms of like participatory television since then, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think like Lynch's work, particularly in the later part of his career, really follows a trajectory where like Twin Peaks ends up standing in for maybe his first like real kind of experimentation with this fascination of like a long-standing crime where you don't know what's happened and there's a sort of mystery to be solved. But even in Twin Peaks, of course, you still have like a character who's there trying to solve the crime. Whether or not Kyle MacLachlan is doing it in maybe the most like the quickest way is a different question, but he's there at least sort of solving the crime. And then as you move through Lynch's other films, like particularly into things like Mulholland Drive, the mystery instead just becomes like the structure of the film. And as you say, like the spectator is really the one, like Lynch becomes more and more interested in making the spectator into the mystery solver, where the spectator has to make sense of the narrative themselves. But he's definitely doing some of that already with Twin Peaks too. But no, I think you're totally right though. Like this idea of Twin Peaks really managing to tap into that idea, and I think maybe people who are not, again, super familiar with the history of the show don't know this, but because I think there's maybe a sense like when the internet really picked up in the, like 93, 94, that was when shows were really able to sort of use the internet and have this kind of connection with the fans, with shows like The X-Files and stuff where there were chat rooms. But as you say, like Twin Peaks actually had a huge amount of like chatter online, but the thing, you have to qualify that because it was really pre what we understand as the internet. They were basically like private groups that people had set up, but there were like tens of thousands of posts about Twin Peaks on these things. They were massive. And like we can talk about this later, but like part of what helped the show stay in as decent of a slot as it got, like the show was, they were going to take it off the air at one point, effectively not air the last few episodes, and the fans started, at Lynch's request, started a massive letter writing campaign. So like there really was a way in which fans were very much sort of part of the show and the network very savvily kind of created a universe around it. And like we can talk about this more as we go on, but like I finally got a copy of The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, which is a book that was released at the end of the first season and very much plays into this stuff. But yeah, we'll keep talking about that.
That was written by Jennifer Lynch, right?
It was David Lynch's daughter, and I'm like maybe 20 pages into it, and it is brutal. Like the things I do for this podcast, dear viewers, it is not an easy book to read. Not in the sense that it's bad quality. It's good quality. It's just very difficult, and that'll become clear why later. But anyway.
Yeah, I've got a great clip I'm gonna play in like a distant future episode of Lynch on, I think, Letterman or Leno, reading out the letter he wants people to send to Bob Iger. I love Lynch's late night appearances. They also like really prefigure some of his future acting, even like his, I don't know if you saw his guest stint on Louis, but
I did. That was amazing. Yeah, it was great.
That was like one of the greatest things in the last few years. We'll have occasion to talk about Lynch as actor later, but he's such a great actor. Anyway, so I guess is there anything else we wanted to mention about the pilot before we think about wrapping up?
I wanted to ask, so like, if we're talking about this sense of like the viewer kind of being drawn into the universe of Twin Peaks, because like that really is what it is, and we'll keep talking about it, I suppose, as we go on. But this, I think Lynch very famously once said something like all of his movies are set in the universe of Twin Peaks, which is a great line, and we'll keep talking about that. But I mean, I think for people who are maybe not as like involved in the fan culture of this show, part of what really struck everybody's fancy here is the fact that it really does feel like a universe that kind of keeps being built out and extended. And you know, I am like a huge nerd for that kind of stuff, and so I'm sort of always obsessed with this like idea of the universe. It's so fascinating. But like for me, that really mattered when I saw it when I was young. But I kind of just wanted to hear maybe more, Simon, about what your, not just sort of quality sense of the pilot was watching it, but like what your reactions were to the show generally in terms of your own liking or disliking of it or whatever when you first saw it. Like, did it really capture your imagination kind of thing?
I mean, I was primed to love it because I'd loved what I'd seen of Lynch's filmography up till then. There's still a couple of his movies that I haven't seen, but I think,
is it The Straight Story? I have never seen The Straight
Story.
I
keep planning to watch it, and I still don't, even though I keep hearing it's amazing. I did rewatch The Elephant Man after John Hurt died. Didn't like it as much as I remembered.
Interesting.
Although I still find it terribly affecting.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the quality about Lynch's films that I find the most fascinating and that keeps me coming back, and I think Twin Peaks is no exception, is that the world that he builds, or the world that he builds that, you know, you just mentioned, that's all kind of the same world. He manages, no matter how horrific it gets, and Twin Peaks will get very horrific for anyone who hasn't seen it before, and maybe because it's horrific in a way that we're not familiar with in our reality, his world is so seductive, and it is a world like you want to go to Twin Peaks. You want to experience that world. It's like another universe, even though it is filled with terrible, terrible things and you know, just like awful occurrences. Maybe it's partially because everyone, for the vast majority of people in Lynch's worlds are mostly quite decent. And they're just happen to be beset upon by these almost cosmic forces. Maybe that's part of it. But like I'm fascinated by the fact that when I watch Twin Peaks or when I watch Mulholland Drive, these are worlds that I'm quite addicted to, and I'm not ready to leave them when the media ends, even though like they really do get quite terrible.
Yeah, they're hard.
That's like, it's not like when you watch like the vast majority of horror films, the horror movie ends and you're relieved to be in your world for the most part. But you know, that's not the feeling of ending a Lynch film, at least not for me.
No, I mean, I think that perfectly captures a lot of what I love about it too. And I think, again, I'm quoting from Dennis here in the book, but he described, I think, something about the show perfectly well that I'd never thought about before, which is the fact of it being quite comforting. Like there being a sense of it as being very cocoon-like. It's like, you know, the world of the show isn't just terrifying and mysterious. It's also very welcoming and warm and like soft and it like he talks about particularly the music in that regard. The music is being almost like, you know, you want to fall asleep to this music. Like it's so beautiful and welcoming. And also, I mean, there's also the joke about like the association with very kind of censorious pleasures around the show, right? Like the fact that, I don't know about you, Simon, but whenever I watch it with my husband, like we always need to get donuts and like have coffee and like you want to kind of participate in these very simple pleasures that the show seems to be offering on the one hand, while at the same time very dark and dire kind of scenarios. But yeah, no, I think all of that like perfectly captures it. I mean, I don't remember super well my first time watching all of this back in the day. Like, I think I was 18, maybe. And when I watched it the first time, most of it was still not very available. There were videotape sets that were available. I watched the first season on video. And at that point, the only video that had been released in North America, I believe, was of the pilot, had the European ending on it, which we haven't talked about yet. But the fact, maybe so people aren't so familiar with this, but when Lynch agreed to shoot the pilot, in order to secure funding for it, ABC got funding from European sources as well, and Lynch was contractually obligated to shoot an ending for the pilot that would turn it into a self-sufficient movie, and they released that in Europe. And for a long time, again, because of weird contract stuff, that was the only video version of the show that was available in North America. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, like now it's the more difficult one to see. Now it's not as common, although it's on both of the video sets, both of the DVD and Blu-ray sets. It's a very different experience when you watch the European one. Have you seen it, Simon? I can't remember.
I think I saw it a very long time ago. I've only seen it like recently in terms of like I rewatched the pilot and then I read up on the differences between them. I mean, not to be honest, I don't think it's the ideal way to watch the pilot.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, and again, I think now most people won't have that problem because the one that's sort of on Netflix and on the Blu-ray sets is the actual one. But anyway, so that's how I saw it. And then I remember trying to watch the second episode and being like, what is happening? Like, this doesn't follow from what ended the first one. And so it was a very different experience. I would say I wouldn't. And then eventually at some point I was able to track down videos of the second season, which is also a very different experience from the first season. And, but anyway, despite all of that, like despite the confusion around the first encounter with the show, I mean, I was still completely hooked on it, like right from the beginning. I mean, I think I watched everything sort of over like 4 days or something, like a psychopath. And then eventually watched the film, and we'll talk about the film down the road in a different episode. But yeah, I mean, I think all just to say that I completely agree. It's a world that I still to this day don't want to leave. Like we were talking about watching the pilot right before this, and for both Simon and I, it's like the difficulty is not watching episodes, or finding time to watch episodes. The difficulty is stopping ourselves at the end of, of a pilot, like waiting until next week to watch the episodes. It's very much something that you could just eat like a lot of pie. It's so good.
Yeah. It's so funny to think that like, when the show was originally airing, people heard, North American viewers heard like, oh, in Europe, there was an ending where they revealed the killer.
The killer was revealed, exactly.
But we're never gonna know because it was in Europe. Like, such a different time for consuming television.
Different time. Well, and also because that actually isn't even really correct. I mean,
no.
the way, the killer that is revealed in the European one has some relation to what happens in the American series and is relevant. And Lynch sort of worked some of that footage into the series later, but it's not. It's a different plot line than what gets developed in the American one, certainly.
Yeah. But that's all we're gonna say about that.
Exactly.
So I'm very pleased to say that we're winding up at a sane time. I wasn't sure how this was going to work. Our next episode will cover the second and third episodes that aired. Yeah, like I said before, we're going to have some guests. We've got a couple planned already. We've got lots more to plan. Which is going to be fun. I know who some of them are. I don't know who the rest will be. There's all kinds of gaps still to be filled, but I'm very much looking forward to. And can I just say, like, the one thing I'll say about having the show come back and having like a new season to enjoy is, like, rewatching the show now, the original run. As alien as the show may have seemed to viewers at the time, it's still extremely beholden to 1990 TV aesthetics, like in terms of the look and even the editing rhythms and stuff. So like, I'm most interested to see like how 2017 Twin Peaks, how that like, and how like, I don't know, because it's not going to look or feel the same. It just can't, because it
can't.
Or if it tries to, that would be a terrible idea, and I can't see that happening. So like that's the thing that I'm most looking forward to about the new episodes, is just seeing what form it takes. Just in those first few seconds of being like, oh yeah. This is what we're in for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could say here, just to wrap up too for the listeners here, it's like the news that the show was coming back, I think still probably receives like weekly celebration in my house. Like it's very, this was like, you know, news to shake the world that Twin Peaks is coming back. And I think one thing I would just say right now too is that there's so much, it's become a kind of pretty common narrative in people who watch television to say like, oh, reboots, remakes, like, ugh, they are always terrible. And, you know, certainly like Gilmore Girls and all of these things recently can maybe speak to that and whatever, that's fine. But I think people who are gearing up, like us, gearing up to prepare for the kind of 217 ones, I think it's worth thinking about that. It's maybe a good idea to now sort of get in your head that it probably won't be exactly the same show and it will be very different. But this is David Lynch. Like, we're getting 18 new hours of David Lynch, like, film and moving image. I mean, that in and of itself is a crazy cause for celebration for a guy who has had such an impact on sort of cinematic thinking, but actually really hasn't made that many films. I mean, this is like an amazing thing. And anyway, I'll just add as well, because I don't think Simon said it, but the episodes that we're recording here, the schedule is going to work out so that if we, you know, if you kind of listen to an episode a week and we record an episode a week, we're going to run right into the new ones. This will take us right to the beginning of the new episodes.
Yes, that's the idea anyway. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that all works out. Thank you, Kate. I think we should wrap up here. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week for the next 2 episodes. Thank you very much.
Yay. Bye.
Thank you.